This is the Happy Rant Sports podcast, in which Ted Cluck and Barnabas Piper rant about old sports, new sports, sports books, sports movies, and anything else related to sports that they feel like. Enjoy.
Hey, welcome to the Happy Rant Sports podcast. I am Ted Cluck, joined as always by my good friend and partner in sports radio, Barnabas Piper. And Pipe, we have a limited time, man, so we need to get right into some sports things. And you very helpfully pointed out last night how bad my NFL preseason predictions were, and I have to tell you, man, I don't disagree at all.
To be fair, I also pointed out that a few of mine were also dog crap.
Yeah, a few of yours were as well, and there were a couple things I think we got like moderately right, but I have to tell you, man, fantasy football, and I know I mention this every show, has just been truly the most miserable experience. And like, I'm quitting. I'm effectively quitting. I don't know if you've seen my lineup for this week, but it's like I'm playing all guys who aren't playing. Like I just emotionally want to be done with it, so I'm choosing to be done.
Well, considering your team is made up of Leonard Fournette and Marshawn Lynch and a
bunch of guys who actually aren't playing, I really don't have a choice.
I was going to say, you don't really have a ton of choices when it comes to guys who are or are not playing.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know why people do this, man. I can't for the life of me like understand why people play fantasy. It's just been to me the most miserable thing. But maybe you can shed some light on it. Your team is bad too, though.
My team is just under 500,
okay.
So like I'm still within striking distance of good. Here's the thing, I have been suffering from injuries. Not me personally. You are personally suffering from injuries. You have the broken toe from playing old-fashioned football.
Yeah, that's right, man.
My pretend football team is suffering from injuries, but is within striking distance of being playoff bound. So I'm still holding out hope that I can pull together this season.
Yeah, definitely. Dude, I got a question for you. Does the Scranton Stranglers owner listen to the podcast?
I doubt it. I'm trying to remember who that is. That's somebody named Mike.
Yeah, I don't know him.
I think if it's the person named Mike, I'm going to go ahead and guess no.
Yeah, so Mike is the king of offering garbage trades every week. And this is a little PSA. Mike, if you're listening, if Mike's family is listening, tell him to stop offering the garbage trades, in part because I will never do them, but also like I'm just not playing anymore. So Mike, save yourself the keystrokes and the time, and I'm not doing a trade.
So Mike he has played in a league with the other guy who it's kind of co-commissioned the league with, a guy named Brandon, who's been a friend of mine for forever. We've talked about him on the show before. Brandon is the originator of the trash trade offer.
Yeah.
He just trolls the league with this stuff. And here's the thing, like every year he'll put out 80 of these offers and he'll get 2 that people accept. So all of a sudden he'll trade like Will Fuller for Julio Jones and David Johnson or something like that. And you're like, what? How? But it's because people just wear it out. Like, he just beats people into submission.
Like direct mail. It's the response rate. If you get like 2 to 3% return on your direct mail piece, you're doing good. And that's how he approaches it.
He was a math major when we were in college together, which means I'm sure he's done a statistical analysis on this. And he's like, if I put out 100 of these offers, it takes 1.5 responses to get me a proper return. And so every time Scranton Stranglers Mike sends me a bad offer, I just call him Brandon in return as a pejorative and ignore him. So
no, that's a good way to deal with it. Dude, my question to you, and it's more philosophical, is I can't for the life of me understand why people enjoy this. Like, because only one person wins the league. Like at the end of the day, there's only one winner. So like, why do people keep doing this to themselves? It's fascinating to me. And maybe it's the difference between, so here's the illustration. I'm playing fantasy NBA because at the end of the day, I'm just not like a super knowledgeable basketball person, and it makes watching the basketball more enjoyable to me. So I can flip on, League Pass and watch a game between the Clippers and the Pelicans, which I think that's who played last night. But, I can watch that game and enjoy it if I have a guy or two playing. And it must be the same for football people, except that I love the game. Like, I love football without fantasy. I feel like this just makes it worse.
And I think that's the difference, is that you are like you're a football aficionado in the sense of like you actually coach football. You are still putting on pads.
Yeah.
Granted, they are leather helmet pads and they don't cover your toes properly, so you break your feet and occasionally get concussed.
Exactly.
But you're still deeply invested in this game. Whereas fantasy, I mean, it's called fantasy football for a reason. It's not called fake football or pretend football or like manage your own team football. It's called fantasy football because most people have like the best they ever got was a fantasy of playing in the at a professional level. So this allows us to manage a team, and I have the exact same experience playing fantasy football that you just described playing basketball. You know, like I don't care about like an Arizona Cardinals Philadelphia Eagles game generally speaking. But fantasy football helps me care a little bit more. It just sort of keeps me invested. I definitely like that with basketball. But I think other people love the sort of the statistical competition of it, and they get real nerdy about it. Looking at you, Brandon, and that's fun for them. But yeah, I think as somebody who I feel like you are somebody who's like if you were a professional, say graphic designer. And you got and like they asked you to like design the church calendar or something like that, you'd be like, I can, but that's not. This is what I do, and you're asking me to put clip art on something. I feel like that's fantasy football.
Dude, that's helpful. That's really helpful, and I appreciate you listening to me like just vent my spleen about it each and every day. Now, to be clear, if I was winning every week, I would love it. So. It would be my favorite thing, but that's not how it's going.
That's because football is a competitive thing to you, not just like an entertainment thing. You don't view football purely from an entertainment
Definitely
standpoint.
not, man. It has a much bigger role in my life than just entertainment. And to that, Piper, I kind of take it hard when things that I've predicted about this season have not gone correctly. And that's been my experience this season as well, as you so helpfully pointed out yesterday. So let's talk about a few of our NFL predictions, how they've gone, and I'll start with some that I've gotten wrong. Jacksonville. So I was bullish on Jacksonville heading into the season. I thought that defense was going to be dominant. I thought year 2 of Leonard Fournette and the defense would hide Blake Bortles' deficiencies. I thought Bortles would mature another year into the consummate game manager that I thought he could be. And
it's almost like Bortles took that as a challenge.
It is. It's like he took it as a challenge and he said, no, I'm going to double down on turning the ball over. And
that's right. Oh, you thought you could make up for my deficiencies. Let me show you
how prominent they are. Yeah, exactly. Let me show you exactly what you're dealing with vis-a-vis deficiencies. So Jacksonville has massively underperformed, and I feel stupid about liking them. What's one that you got wrong, Pi?
I believe I said the phrase Tennessee should be a playoff contender this year, and then you asked a question at one point during our predictions about backup quarterbacks who could be this year's Case Keenum. So starter goes down, they step up, and I'm ashamed to say it aloud for a second time, but I'm going to because this is how this is how you lance the boil of stupidity. I said that Blaine Gabbert had the potential to be that guy.
And you know what? I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. So to implicate myself in that, I was too
and
on the...
Blaine Gabbert is not an NFL quarterback. He makes Blake Bortles look like Drew Brees. And the Titans... Now, statistically, I think because they play in a horrific division, they are still in the running for the playoffs. But if you've watched them play, they're garbage. And if they make the playoffs, they are just going to get pasted by somebody. Because Marcus Mariota, apparently, it seems like he's regressed every year since his rookie
year. Dude, he has.
Year,
if you could go back to like college Mariota, this would be an interesting thing. But yeah, you're right.
Well, and this is here's the thing. The entire NFL is shifting towards what has been stereotypically called a college offense, except for Marcus Mariota, who is getting worse than he was in college.
True.
I don't get it.
Yeah, this should all be like playing to his favor. But in the NFL is all like a Big 12 game now. I mean, there's no defense. If you want to watch defense, don't watch the NFL in 2018.
Or college
football or the NBA. But yeah, I mean, if anything, all of this should be playing like right to Mariota's strengths. But yeah, the Titans are. I think the Titans, Piper, are the least watchable team in the league. Like, you take another garbage team like Arizona, and at least they're kind of fascinating in how terrible they are. In that, they have Josh Rosen, who I truly think is going to be good.
He when you watch him play, you're like, oh, that's an NFL quarterback.
Absolutely.
Who's inexperienced.
He's inexperienced.
You watch Marcus Mariota play, you're like, oh, that's an experienced, really bad quarterback.
Yeah, in an offense that's just abysmal in every way that an offense can be. The Titans they're one of the least watchable teams in the league for that reason. Like, it's just not fun to watch a Titans game. And that's too bad because we live in their metro area and we're like forever watching Titans games.
Yeah, I actually ponied up to get the NFL package this year.
Dude.
Like, I'm just paying an exorbitant amounts of money because I couldn't watch the Titans anymore. I was like, no, not only do I need to watch the Vikings out of a sense of loyalty and addiction and self-loathing, I need to watch anybody not the Titans. I think I've watched maybe an eighth of a Titans game this year by accident. And that's about all I can handle because that team playing that bad in those uniforms is just...
It's really, really hard to watch. You would watch almost anything besides that. So, like, I want to stay on self-loathing a little bit, Piper, before we get back into our bad predictions. Where are you at? Where's your, like, as you look down the road, like into the self-loathing future vis-a-vis the Vikings, like, how do you see it playing out?
So they've set us up really well for a self-loathing year. Last year was a surprise, awesome year, which means when they blew it in the NFC Championship game, it had been sort of an amazing run, but also kind of a surprise. And those of us who were watching were like, Case Keenum's not that good. No, I didn't expect the Vikings to get pasted by the Eagles, but it wasn't a surprise that they lost. Now this year, expectations for the year, and this was me speaking from the heart of the preseason. I said I don't like it when we're the favorite. I'm not used to this, and it feels like a big letdown waiting to happen. They proceed to go out and tie the Packers and lose to the Bills, and just sort of, and then lose a shootout to the Rams, where Sean McVay looked like a wizard waving his wand over them and making them the fools. And it was just a bad start to the year. They looked sluggish. Their defense didn't show up, which was supposed to be their strength. But then, all of a sudden, they turned the page after that Rams game and I think it was after the Rams game. It was after the Bills game. One of the two. I'm getting them mixed up. But then they've started to be competitive, and their defense looks good, and their offense is making up for a bad offensive line, and they've even run the ball really well, even without Dalvin Cook the last few weeks. And so, here's my problem. They could go like 10-2 in their next 12 games, and Vikings fans will be like, Super Bowl, here we come, which is the worst possible place to be as a Vikings fan.
Absolutely.
And so, like, they need to lose like every third game from here on out, which makes them a playoff team, but a perpetual reminder that they're flawed and we shouldn't get our hopes up. Because the quarterback who shall not be named has yet to do something disastrous this year. He fumbles periodically, but it's not the end of the world. He's been throwing the ball really well. Their offensive skill positions, other than Cook, have been mostly healthy. Like, things are generally in their favor. Something's going to fall apart. It hasn't all happened yet.
No, I know. It's all about managing expectations, Piper, and I want to help you do that as the season moves along. So hopefully it won't be too big of a blow when things do finally come back to earth there in Viking land. But Piper, I want to lay another preseason prediction on you, and the jury's still out on this one to me. So my prediction was I was bullish on the Browns. I was excited about what they were doing. I loved their offseason, and the Browns they've been just about what I thought they would be, to be honest, or maybe even a little better. They've been in these overtime games. They've lost overtime games that have been really close, obviously. And, this is very easily a team that could be a lot better. Their record could be a lot better than it is now. And they're playing competitive football. But you put this in front of me as a failed prediction. So I want to hear you talk about that a little bit more. Talk about the Browns.
Well, I put it in front of you as a failed prediction because my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, because as the listeners all know, our show prep for this consists of trying to remember things off the top of our
exactly.
head. Off the top of my head, you had a deep affection for the team, and I think you said they could be a playoff team this year, like a 9-7-ish.
Yeah, that was top end.
Something
though.
along.
I mean,
those
that
lines.
was like everything goes right for them. They could maybe be that, but yeah.
I don't recall you saying something. So you said the jury is still out on this team. To take the jury metaphor, this is a rigged jury because on that jury, the football gods have placed something called Hugh Jackson.
That's true.
And Hugh Jackson means that the jury will never ever rule in the Browns' favor because he's the worst coach in the NFL. He might be the worst coach the NFL has ever seen.
Yeah, he's really, really bad. He's really bad. And even the way he throws people on his staff under the bus in these post-game pressers, I mean, it's fascinating really how bad it is. And
I mean, is there, there are coaches who you're like, oh, he's a good coordinator, but he's not a great head coach, or he's a good play caller, but he has to have the defense do something else, or he's more of an organizational guy, but he has to let the play calling be handled. Like, is Hugh Jackson good at anything?
That's the thing. I don't know. I don't know what he does. I really don't know.
He can't win a press conference. Yeah. He can't win a practice. He can't call a play. He can't hire people properly. He can't pick a quarterback.
He can't even be like a good management puppet, like the Clapper is, like Jason Garrett in Dallas.
Yeah, like he's a terrible coach too, but at least he's sort of like an innocuous face of the franchise who's sort of like he's unembarrassing from a persona standpoint. Sure. Yeah, Hugh Jackson is a disaster. I mean, the man won one football game in 2 years.
Absolutely.
Then he managed to he started this year with Tyrod Taylor, who has been an adequate NFL quarterback, turned him into not an NFL quarterback at all, failed to start the number 1 overall pick, who proceeded to immediately show them that he is in fact a good quarterback. Yeah. And then he's managed them out of 2 or 3 wins. I think they could be over 500 this year if they had a coach. Like, if you swapped Jason Garrett and Hugh Jackson, I bet they'd be 500 this year. And Jason Garrett is a bad coach.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's...
But he's just like a plain bad coach, not a historically horrendously bottom of the barrel bad coach.
He's just like a very basic bad coach, for sure.
How is it that they didn't fire Hugh?
Dude, I don't know. I really don't know. I sort of got the motif that John Dorsey was after in terms of personnel stuff. So that made sense. It looked like they had a plan, but keeping Hugh, there was no reason to keep him because they weren't building anything and they weren't maintaining any continuity. You know what I mean? It's like, usually when a team keeps a coach, there's a sense of, we want to keep the coach and the quarterback together, or we saw enough good things that we want to continue to build on it. But there was really no defensible reason to keep Hugh Jackson, which makes it fascinating.
When there's a coach this bad, it's wasting years of a quarterback's life. So when you draft a quarterback high, you have what 4 to 5 years of them being paid next to nothing to essentially load up the rest of your roster and be great. That's how Seattle was so good early in Russell Wilson's career and why they're not now, because they had to pay him like a star quarterback. And instead, they just burned up one of those years by keeping a coach who's just the dumbest. And it's a little bit like when the Rams drafted Jared Goff but kept Jeff Fisher. And then they made the change, and look, all of a sudden they have a good offensive coach who can call plays, and they have Wade Phillips who can call a defense. That's what the Browns need next year. They need to find Sean McVay Jr. because they have the talent to be good.
Yeah, no, that's right, man. And the interesting thing about it, though, is that you put yourself, if you're the Browns, you put yourself in this tough situation every offseason where it's like, what's going to happen is the Browns are going to be 6-10, or maybe 7-9. And there's going to be all this optimism of we've won games, but everybody's still going to know that Huey is a bad coach. So it's like, do you go 7-9 and you've got all this kind of optimism on one level, but then you fire that coach? Do you make Baker Mayfield learn a new staff and all that stuff the next year? So, they've really just put off doing a hard thing.
Well, I mean, John Gruden is working out so well for the Raiders. Maybe they should go through $10 million a year like Bill Cowher.
Can we talk about the Raiders? Like, do you think?
As a preface, let me say that one of my terrible predictions preseason was that John Gruden is playing possum, and he's actually spent the last several years sort of studying up on modern NFL tactics,
exactly.
And he's going to unleash it on the league. Well, if he's playing possum, he's doing this play dead thing for the entire year.
He's really playing possum.
And he's playing super dead.
Absolutely.
And it's really impressive.
Absolutely.
Except, John, it's time to wake up now, buddy, because you're making all of the worst moves and your team sucks.
Exactly. So, Piper, you're an NBA fan, and tanking is commonplace in the NBA. So, teams will lose kind of intentionally, and there's an art and a science to tanking in that, you put a team on the floor so that it's not like obvious and readily apparent that you're tanking. But, nevertheless, it happens a lot in the NBA. Do you think the Raiders are tanking in that they've just traded Amari Cooper, who, we may have differing views on Amari Cooper. I don't think he's very good. I actually think getting Amari Cooper, out of the building is not such a bad thing for the Raiders. But anyway, they trade Khalil Mack. They trade Amari Cooper. They've got all these draft picks now. They're not going to win this year. Do you think they're tanking?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the fact that they didn't even make an effort to sign Khalil Mack, who is a top 2 or 3 defensive player in the league. At the beginning of this year, before he got hurt, he was the best defensive player in the league. They didn't even try to sign him. They dumped Cooper. All the guys they've signed have been old, which means that they wanted like placeholders for young guys. The thing is, like, that's not how you rebuild in the NFL. Right. In the NBA, you do that because 1 or 2 stars and then a couple role players and your team is transformed. In the NFL, you need like 40 decent players to have a good roster, and they have 3. Yeah. And I couldn't name any of them. I'm assuming they have at least 3. They're tanking. It looks like the Giants are tanking now too. Because did you see the moves they made this week?
Yeah, fascinating, man. Eli Apple is headed to New Orleans. What was the other Giants trade this week? It was
Snacks Harrison going to Detroit.
Right. That's right.
So they traded their big. So two defensive starters. Yep. One was Eli Apple was like the 10th overall pick a couple years ago, and then Damon Harrison, who's the defensive tackle, big run stuffer, going to Detroit. That was for like a 5th round pick too, which is I think it's a great
absolutely
move for
if you're Detroit, man, you do that all day long.
Their run stopping has been really bad this year. Yep. So, it looks like they're kind of loading up for the quarterback they should have drafted this year.
So, okay, let's talk about that for a minute. I don't remember if we talked about the controversy over drafting the running back in the first round for the Giants. I think, given our differing philosophies, I was probably okay with it. You probably weren't. And I think I agree with you now. Like, I think they definitely should have gone quarterback, and I think almost everyone who watches football thinks that. Although taking nothing away from Saquon Barkley, he has been as advertised. He's been excellent.
See, I think Barkley is the best argument for not drafting a running back high because he's come in as, what was he, the 4th pick? Something like that. He's come in. He's been everything they hoped he would be. He has been one of the best playmakers we've seen come into the league in years. Just explosive and strong and highlight reel everything, and their offense is abysmal.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of goes to show how the nature of offense now. A great running back is just one more playmaker on the team. He's not the driving force. Yeah, I mean they really should have drafted Josh Rosen and set themselves up for another 6 to 12 years of success.
Yeah.
And because the other thing that somehow we've missed it over the last few years, or at least a lot of people have, is Eli just falling off a cliff. Like, this isn't his first bad year. He's still falling. This is like his 3rd terrible year in a row.
For sure.
He's an awful quarterback.
Yeah, so what's going on there? I mean, in this age of we have all this film and all these analytics and all these metrics. Yet, why do the Giants stay with an Eli Manning? Like, is it just sort of the bias of this guy's a legend and he took us to Super Bowls, and you could make the argument that he was among the worst Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. He always heated up at the right time, but he was never like a jaw-droppingly good NFL quarterback. What's going on?
Yeah. So I think the main problem is that he has had enough success franchise-wise that they feel a sense of loyalty to him. Like they want him to retire a Giant because not everybody is Bill Belichick and just willing to cut ties just a little too early instead of way too late. And with your quarterback, that's incredibly costly because your whole team rises and falls. Now, the thing that they could have done, which would have been like a hedge the bets, is keep Eli Manning and draft a quarterback, number 3 overall, because he's 37 years old. It's not like he's got 8 more years left. Or trade for Teddy Bridgewater, or and there's a number of things they could have done to shore up that position and build for the future. And instead, a team who didn't need Teddy Bridgewater traded for him as like an insurance policy.
Exactly.
And Drew Brees is playing as well as he ever has, so they clearly don't need him. But if they did, he's there.
Dude, so that's the one I don't get. Like, if you're Jacksonville or the Giants, different teams going in different directions, obviously. But, Jacksonville, there was the sense of, this could be a Super Bowl team. And, the big move they make before the trade deadline is bringing in Carlos Hyde, who will give you, like, Chris Ivory production. I mean, you're...
Which is fantastic for the Browns because it takes one of Hugh Jackson's idiocies out of his hands, which is running Carlos Hyde instead of Nick Chubb, who's dramatically better.
Exactly. So you've made things easier for Hugh, but you haven't solved the gaping problem on your team if you're Jacksonville. So yeah, fascinating.
I think a lot of it is decision makers in the NFL are get really attached to the cost of a player or the history of a player. So with Eli Manning, it's the history. 2 Super Bowls, been there a long time. They wanted to retire a Giant, etc. With Bortles, it's the cost, meaning we spent a really high draft pick on him. If we cut ties, we have to do the same thing over again. So instead of realizing that he's a sunk cost and you just need to cut ties, they keep just reinvesting in him and are going to tank their franchise. I think in the NFL now you probably have about a 3-year competitive window, unless you're the Patriots or the Steelers.
Dude, so on that,
and their whole roster is going to turn over in 2 years, and they're going to have wasted this incredible defense.
Yeah, no, that's true. And really on that level, I mean, if you are John Gruden and you're tanking, maybe it makes more sense to trade Khalil Mack. Given the fact that. The shelf life on these pass rushers seems to be a little bit shorter in that they're almost like a great running back. You're going to get like 5 or 6 really high quality years out of a Von Miller or a Khalil Mack or whatever. And maybe if you're the Raiders, you go, it's not going to be this year. It's not going to be next year. Let's move this guy while he's got maximum value.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing about that, though, is that like 2 weeks after they traded him, John Gruden goes into the post-game press conference and is like, man, we need to figure out how to get a pass rush.
That was weird.
You had one, and you traded him to Chicago, John. Yeah. Did you forget that?
That was very strange. Not his finest hour on television, that's for sure. But,
and he's had a lot of not fine hours on television. In fact, that was his career for a long time, was not fine hours on television.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Where do you put this? Where do you put this Monday night crew in the pantheon of abysmal Monday night crews? So going all the way back to like the Dennis Miller experiment back in the late 90s, and there have been some like really historically bad Monday night crews. Where do you put this one? And would you look?
It's worse than the Dennis Miller.
I agree.
Crew.
I also think that
I liked the Dennis Miller experiment, relatively speaking, because the problem is that Miller doesn't talk meathead, and you need to have a certain amount of like. I mean, think like Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, who I think I also just can't stand. But like their center cut NFL broadcasters. They say almost nothing insightful or meaningful. They give one or two old school opinions. There's sort of some rah-rah. Whereas like Dennis Miller's using multisyllabic words and leaving people confused, and nobody gets his jokes. And the entire audience felt like he was laughing at them because he probably was. I found it amusing. I think this Monday Night Crew is better than last year's, though.
Yeah.
Which was the most boring.
Dude, who was it last year?
Sean, what's his face? Who was like he'd done like college basketball and some different things. Like he's McDonough. Yeah, I mean, just again, very professional sounding, but just like he's a professional sounding play-by-play guy. And who was with him? I don't
remember.
Was it Gruden?
I think it was still Gruden last year.
I think it was.
Dude, it was Gruden, but it was lame duck Gruden. It was like, I know I'm going to be coaching Gruden. That was kind of like.
And he didn't have the other people in the booth to sort of like
bounce off of,
do the interplay between them. Yeah, I think this year's crew. I think the play-by-play guy, Joe Tessitore, is fine. You know, I never think twice about Tessitore. He's just sort of there. I think Jason Witten is a broadcasting waste of space and airwaves.
I hate to say that too because I loved him as a player, and he seems like a genuinely like great dude. But yeah, this is not for him.
Once again in Jason Witten's career, he's riding Tony Romo's coattails.
Exactly.
It's and then Booger McFarland is just the weirdest. I mean, everything about the Booger McFarland experience is weird. First of all, his name is Booger, and people say it with a straight face. Like that's a nickname. You know, we talk about how people are called like Joey as a grown up, and like, well, when do you stop being Joey and become Joe? When do you stop being Booger?
That's true. Yeah,
I don't.
Dude, what are
how did that happen?
Some, like instances in real life where being called Booger is gonna work against him. Like I'm trying to think like when he gives his daughter away for marriage, and like there are just gonna be some times in adult life where it's not gonna be great to be called Booger.
Well, I want to know like if he, you go to the bank to apply for. To apply for a loan or whatever, you have to put down your real full name. And so I don't even know what his real name is. Like
it's
Steve
Anthony.
Or something.
Anthony McFarland.
Anthony. Yeah. Okay. And so yeah, he puts down Anthony, but he looks across at the banker in his Joseph A. Bank suit and says, "But please call me Booger.
You can call me. My friends call me Booger."
That's right. My friends call me Booger. What?
Yeah. No, it's fantastic.
But then
definitely.
But then he's like sitting on the sidelines, but it's like it's like on a crane or something. Yeah. It's like this elevated chair, and he's like the primary color guy, but sitting in this weird wheeled elevated chair on the sidelines instead of in the booth. So then Witten is like the third color guy, or the second color guy, third guy in the booth, and offers nothing. It just
it's a disaster.
I don't understand the dynamic at
It's
all.
A disaster, and
then McFarland calls Odell Beckham Jr. a diva for needing to go to the bathroom instead of peeing on himself mid-game, which is, I think that sort of sums up the Monday Night Football experience. You have a man named Booger criticizing one of the NFL's best wide receivers and calling him a diva for not urinating on himself mid-game.
The old should you or shouldn't you pee on yourself debate. I mean, it's been around since the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I mean, right, but again, it's kind of like the name Booger. Most of us grow out of that one at about the age of 4 and a half.
That's true, man. That's so true.
Should I or should I not pee on myself?
Yeah, Monday Night Football is disastrous, man. It's so bad. And it breaks my heart because that used to be like just the great NFL viewing experience. Great crew, big games. Yeah. That used to be a special thing, and now it is no longer. But Pipe, we are drawing near the end of our window of time, and I want to talk about what we're reading. This is a thing that we used to do all the time on this program. We've kind of gotten away from it. So what are you reading in sports that's been good?
I just read a book called Wait Till Next Year by Doris Kearns Goodwin. So Doris Kearns Goodwin is more well known for being a historian. Yeah. So she's written biographies of like Theodore Roosevelt. She wrote Team of Rivals, the excellent Abraham Lincoln bio. She wrote, I think she's written on maybe Truman. But this is a memoir of hers about growing up on Long Island as a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And so it sort of weaves in. It's a historian's like it's from a historian's giftedness, but it's like an emotional family memoir, so it's all very nostalgic. But the Brooklyn Dodgers are kind of the main character. But then also talking about her her relationships with her neighbors who were New York Giants fans and New York Yankees fans. So for me as a baseball fan I have a historic crush on the Brooklyn Dodgers. It was great. She's a brilliant writer and storyteller. And then just the nostalgia of old baseball is one of my favorite things. So it's called Wait Till Next Year, and it's a super enjoyable
Nice,
read.
man. I like it. Dude, so I've got a couple things as well. I'm actually, before we got on the air today, I was reading a piece on the Players Tribune by Darius Miles. It's called What the Hell Happened to Darius Miles by Darius Miles. And he's a throwback to one of my favorite eras in the NBA, so sort of that early 2000s. A lot of guys coming out of high school. That Clippers team was super young, super fun. They weren't very good, but they always put on a good show. That was the Lamar Odom, Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson.
Was Cuttino Mobley on that team, or no? He was only on the Rockets.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't think Cuttino Mobley was on that team, but that was a super fun team to watch, man. And this piece is just bananas. It's like really deep dive behind the scenes, what it was like to play for Donald Sterling in the early 2000s on the Clippers. I mean, just fascinating stuff about these guys would, they were an NBA team, but they practiced at like some JUCO in South Central Los Angeles with like showers that didn't work and like metal lockers, and these guys would be rolling up to practice in like Ferraris and Rolls Royces and going into practice at this JUCO, but just
it's almost like Donald Sterling was a slumlord.
Yeah, and crazy, and as it turns out, he was both of those things. So, really fascinating read there by Darius Miles. And the other book that I'm reading is it's an autobiography by a hockey player named Derek Sanderson. So my dad is a huge hockey guy. He grew up a season ticket holder of the Chicago Blackhawks. My dad played hockey his whole life. He still plays at almost age 70, so tip of the cap to Pops for that. But the book is crazy. This guy, it was not put out on a Christian label. It's not a Christian book. It's really gritty. But he has like a genuine conversion experience at the end where, he talks about, rock bottom and his brokenness and all the sex and substance abuse stuff and just all the craziness that he experienced as an athlete, and really owns his own sin and all that in a way that authors and famous people almost never do. So I finished this book and I go, almost no Christians will read this. Like the idea of a Christian reading this would be almost shocking, but it's a book that like, a Christian who likes sports should really read. And I think,
what's the name of it?
You know what? I knew you were going to ask me that, and I can look it up right now. So, give me 1 second here in the studio. Derek Sanderson book. It's called Crossing the Line, The Outrageous Story of a Hockey Original. Great read, man. Really fast read, really fun. Sanderson's a charismatic guy. If you were into hockey at all in like the 70s and late 60s, you'll know that name. But really fascinating stuff, man, and I enjoyed it.
It's like the true story of Slapshot.
Dude, it really is, man. It really is. And with, someone's like real humble sort of conversion at the end, which was like an unexpected twist. I didn't expect it to go there, but really interesting stuff, man. I'm enjoying it. So, Pipe,
that crossing the line by Derek Sanderson.
Crossing the Line by Derek Sanderson. Great read. And Piper, we are now out of time. So we have done what we always do on this program, in that we have wandered to and fro throughout these topics. And until next time, Darius Miles.
The Happy Rant is brought to you by Resonate Recordings. If you go to resonaterecordings.com, you can see the full range of services they offer. So if you're considering starting a podcast, they are the ones we recommend going with. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see their prices, to connect with them and ask any questions, and to see what they can do to help you launch, edit, master, and improve your podcast. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see what they can do to help you launch and improve your podcast.